Hi, I'm Shauna. I'm the Executive Director of the DeAngelis Center Foundation. I am joined today with some wonderful attendees, but most importantly, Casey Gardner, who is social worker extraordinaire. She has the longest title I think we have actually in Jeffco Public Schools. But she is very much a child whisperer, people whisperer. These coping strategies that you're going to learn from Casey, I've done them with her before. These are applicable for adults as well as children. And I think by the end of this, you will learn a lot of really new and fun skills and feel uplifted by the end of this. So, Casey, take it away and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks so much for asking me to be here, Shauna. Um, yeah, my title is Social Emotional Learning Counselor for Gifted and Talented, but we do abbreviate it as GT-SELC. So this is on how do we support kids' coping strategies, and they don't have to be your children's, although I wrote that. I don't have human children, but I have thousands of human children. So I just don't have any I have to pay for college for. But a lot of times what we see are the kids on the left, and we would like to get them to the kid on the right of the screen. So I love this page from the Berenstein Bears because kids, even kids in the same family with the same experiences, some of them view the world like the picture on the left. Everything is flowers and balloons and sunshine, and we're whistling. And some, it's really scary. Sometimes it's trauma related, for sure, on the right, but sometimes it's just kids who are neurodivergent or, just have higher anxiety, which in this world post-COVID, kids have higher anxieties. So one, we have to kind of be aware of how the kids view the world and what kind of things are going to scare them so that we can prepare them for whatever's happening. If they're going to an Avs game and there's going to be a big crowd and you know that your child sees the world as the one on the right, then you're going to want to do some preparation when they're calm. When we get there, there's going to be a lot of people. What strategies are we going to use when you start feeling, if this is your trigger, things in your belly? How can you manage your own self? So I put this first because I think it's really important to know where the kids are coming from, because their perception of the world really does matter and it influences how they react in everything. I love Ross Greene, and this is my favorite quote of his: children do well if they can. I like to think when kids aren't doing well that it's a lagging skill and that we need to help them learn that skill instead of, they're trying to be a booger. Nobody wakes up and says, how can I piss people off today? Nobody does, not even us with people that we don't like. Most people do not seek out conflict. They don't want to feel badly. They don't want to look like they're out of control. So I love this because kids really do the best that they can. So this is a video that I always show the kids. Now, I worked special ed, like I said, for 23 years, but the last 7 in gifted ed, the kids are fascinated by anything to do with their brain and body. I had a pretty bad fracture of my wrist in August and had to have surgery. They all wanted to see the x-rays. They're telling me when I'm showing them what went into my wrist in the surgery, I could have made that with a 3D printer, Miss Casey. So they love learning about the brain, the body. So this is a quick little video. And Shauna, scream if the sound doesn't come through. But we use this language with kids at a lot of schools. If you have kids in school, I do recommend talking to the people, the social workers, the psychs, the cells, whoever, and find out what language they're using so that you're using that same language. But let's start this, and hopefully the sound is going to work.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact. We're going to break it down using a visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, hold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason. Bringing your lid down is tough for all of us. We'll dive further into that next.
Right.
The more you understand how your brain works and how
There we go. All right. So we use that language with kids because when their amygdala is in control, they're in fight, flight, freeze, and now we say fawn as well. And their prefrontal cortex is not engaged. So they're not doing any kind of rational thought. I wanted to have this in here because a lot of times when kids are having issues, we label them as a tantrum, as if it's something that they're in control of, where often it really is a sensory meltdown. So let's just look at the difference here. A tantrum is usually when the kid doesn't get what they want, or they didn't get what they wanted. They didn't achieve a goal. They're looking for an audience. They're testing boundaries. Things are typically resolved through consequences, a reminder of boundaries, removal from the situation, or a distraction. And the kid is not emotionally drained after a tantrum. They can just go on with their day. So we see that even in elementary school, and I work in 2 elementary schools, but I've worked all levels from K-12, and we see them in high schools too. A sensory meltdown is not just for our neurodivergent folks, it's for anyone who gets overwhelmed with sensory input. So they're reacting to an event, a feeling, overloaded. It's not that they want something or need something or that there's a goal. They'll continue whether you're there or not. It only ends when the child has calmed down and their feelings are out, and they are wiped out after. Often when a kid has a meltdown at school, they nap, if it's a big one, because they are just wiped out. And especially if the kid is older, there's a lot of embarrassment and shame that comes along with their behavior. And so it's really important to know the difference. And most of the stuff that we do is more effective with these meltdowns. With the tantrums, you're going to set some limits, you're going to put some consequences in, and that's okay. And sometimes it's hard to know which one is which, but just kind of play with it and see if that helps. Oh, and if anyone has any questions, please pipe up. I can't see you when I'm driving, so
No
feel
worries,
free to
Casey. I've got the chat open so people can do that. And then at the end, of course, we'll do question
questions.
and answer too.
Perfect. Okay. So kids never choose to have a meltdown. They never choose any anxiety-related behavior, just like we wouldn't. I wouldn't want to have a meltdown in front of my colleagues or my family. It's not a choice. It's your brain isn't coping with something, and your brain needs to be showered in love, compassion, and safety, not fear, shame, and punishment. And so this is where sometimes I struggle with teachers because they see behaviors as tantrums and they want to assign consequences rather than helping them reintegrate into the community. So it's really important to know that these are not usually chosen behaviors. Harlow. I love this anger iceberg, and we can use it with any kind of a feeling. But the whole point of it is that what we see above the surface is just really the tip of the iceberg. There are so many feelings, and you could put any feeling there in the top. It could be sadness, it could be any kind of feeling. But if you only treat what you see at the top, then you're missing what's really going on. So it's really important that we dig deeper. And often we have to wait until the kids are ready for us to dig deeper, or the adults, because we don't know. I mean, if they're feeling disrespected, it might come out as angry, or if they're nervous, or if they're jealous over something, or just didn't sleep well and they're grumpy, and so they're kind of snapping at people. Maybe they're hangry. That's a big one that we deal with in elementary is, they didn't have enough time to eat their breakfast and they forgot their snack and now they're snapping off at people. So I think this is a really important illustration on how to really kind of dig deep. And we'll kind of go into some of the questions that you can ask to try to get at what is going on with the kid. Because, if you look at socially, I think we've screwed kids up. I mean, I'm one of them, even though I'm old now. As a young girl, I was told it wasn't ladylike to be angry. And my brother was told that it wasn't being a man to cry. And both of those are nonsense. But when I get angry, I cry, which just pisses me off even more. But usually the issue is not, honey. Well, Harlow changed that for us. So the issue is something else, usually, than what we're actually seeing. And so helping kids to understand that, if you're scared, it's okay to be scared and to tell us that you're scared and to look and act like you're scared. But most people don't have those skills yet, even a lot of adults. So I love this graphic because beneath every behavior, there's a feeling, and beneath every feeling is a need. And when we meet the need rather than focus on the behavior, we deal with the cause and not the symptom, which is basically what that whole anger iceberg is about. And we just need to keep looking deeper. What is that root cause? I put this in just because it's the holiday season, and holidays can be really tough for any neurodivergent folk, which includes gifted and talented. It's not just autism and ADHD, it's giftedness. Both sides of the bell curve are neurodivergent, and people have different levels of it. But all the changes in routines and the different environments and the social pressures, and things are loud and there's a lot of intense emotions. And it's really important to let people know that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to say, you know what, I'll go to Graham's house, but I'm going to probably need a little time to go read my book or whatever, and just let them do that and let them learn to regulate themselves, which is the goal. Is we want kids to be able to grow up to know what they need in different situations so that they're in control of their own emotions. And, there's a lot of adults that never were taught this. And so it's not just adults, it's not just kids, it's adults as well. And it's adults with social work degrees, because it includes me. I mean, it includes everyone. There's times that we struggle. So this is something that I realized about a year or two into my gifted career, that I was doing backwards. For years, I worked with kids with their special ed category with significant emotional disabilities. And so they were the kids who were too aggressive to be in a general classroom without extra support. And so I would bargain and bargain, do your math, and then you can have your break. Well, the math might take 4 hours, and often it did. And then their break was a regulation activity. So it was like, oh, I'm doing this backwards. If I let them go do a regulation activity, then they could do their math in about 10 minutes. But by, hitting them over the head with the hammer, you got to do the math first. You got to do the math first. wasn't helping and it wasn't teaching them. They were telling me clearly, I need this first, and I wasn't listening. So there's no shame for anything that we do, because we do the best that we can with the information that we have. And then when I got new information, I changed, and what a difference it made in how I practice with kids. So now, you know, I don't tell them that they have to do their non-preferred activity before a break. And I use regulation activity as the term. So, and we'll kind of go through in a little bit what some of these are. But this is where I struggle with teachers, because they're like, all you do is let them play a game. Well, sometimes they are playing a game. And sometimes they're coloring, and sometimes they're laying down and listening to Storyline online on the iPad, because this is helping their brain reconnect so that their lids are no longer flipped. And so we have to really change our thinking that we're not rewarding bad behavior. We're helping give kids skills to be able to do the tasks that we want. And that's why it's so important to know the difference between the tantrum and the meltdown. Because if you're setting limits with a kid in a meltdown, you're not going to get anywhere. If you're setting limits with a kid in a tantrum, then you're going to get somewhere, and you don't need to do the break because they're just trying to get something. Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, Casey, actually, one of the things that I had made a note on too is that decompression time, to use that word for everybody to recognize everybody needs decompression time from that as
Mm-hmm.
well. And the adults in the situation as well, or the adults who are elevated. And we also need to make sure that people understand, because a lot of our law enforcement first responders are also dealing with people who have not been diagnosed ADHD, twice exceptional, GT. So, and because those of us who are adults have not learned those things about ourselves,
Right.
um, we have some of this that's undiagnosed as well. So we can help other adults in this way too by ensuring and recognizing that.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well said. So regulation has to come first. And we spend a lot of time, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on these things. So it could be, let's just take some deep breaths together, and we'll go through a bunch of breathing strategies. Blowing bubbles is a really great way to help kids slow their breathing down, because if you blow really fast into either a bubble blower or a windmill, you know, that spinny thing in the middle, I don't think that was the correct word for it, but pinwheel, that's what it is. If you blow too fast, it won't go. You have to slow your breathing down so that the bubbles actually come out, and so the pinwheel will actually spin. Temperature stuff, the picture of the kid's hand, there's ice there. Some kids like warmer things, some kids like colder things, and try them out. A cold cloth behind the back of their neck when they're really in a meltdown can be helpful. Some kids like to do ice up and down their arms, on their face, or a warm compress. It depends on the kid, but it does help a lot. Putting their hands under running water, that is really helpful as well. And it's things that kids can control, because these are things kids can all do. And then the last one is getting water. This was one that I just learned a few years ago, saying to kids, you know, I think I'm going to get a drink of water. Do you want to have a drink with me? And a lot of times they'll say yes. And nowadays, kids all have water bottles since COVID. And as you're drinking, you're actually calming. And so if I said to a kid, I think you need a drink of water, often I would get pushback. But by saying, let's take a drink of water together, or would you like to join me? Then they're in control, and you're much more likely to get the buy-in. And co-regulation is just doing the regulation stuff with the kids. And so maybe it's talking, just having a conversation. Maybe it's we're going to play a game and we can talk. Especially with boys, you get way more out of them playing a game. They will talk. They don't have to make eye contact. And it's a nice bonding thing as well. But that's one of the things that people see as a reward, which is too bad. Going for a walk, getting exercise, drawing is the bottom right, doing stuff together. These kind of things are great. Because regulation has to come first. If we can't get those lids back to where they're not flipped, then anything that we're doing is not going to work because they just can't attend to them. So calming strategies. We tell the kids you always have your lungs with you. And so we teach them lots of different ones. And there's some that the younger kids prefer, and there's some the older kids prefer. And if you give them a whole bunch of choices, they'll choose what's the best. So here's a list, but we're going to go through them on separate slides. So the hot chocolate breath, boy, the kindergartners and first graders just love this. So we're going to hold our hand out like we've got a mug of hot chocolate, and we're going to breathe it in through our nose because we want to breathe in through our nose. It filters stuff. And then we're going to hold our breath. Now it's not in here, but the newer research since this picture came out is that it's important in slowing your breathing down that we actually hold our breath for a few seconds. And then we're going to breathe out slowly through our mouth like we're cooling off the hot chocolate. So we're breathing in, holding it, and then and maybe once is enough. It usually isn't. Some kids might need 3 or 4. Some kids might need 10. It's okay. Whatever they need is okay, because we're teaching them how to notice when their bodies feel calmer and when they feel like their brains are reconnected. Another one similarly is we're smelling the flower and we're blowing out the candle. So it's the exact same thing. So I'm gonna smell the flower, hold my breath, and then blow out the candle. You could also use a birthday cake. So I'm gonna smell the flowers that you gave me for my birthday, and I'm gonna blow out the candles on my cake. You can do whatever kind of imagery works for the child that you're dealing with, which is where in schools and on buses, knowing a little bit about the kids is really helpful. Relationships is so key in getting them to even be willing to try these things because they're so afraid of being embarrassed or shamed. This is one that littler kids tend to prefer, but it's very kinesthetic. And so again, we're putting our hand up and we're just gonna trace. So we're gonna breathe in, hold, breathe out, breathe in, hold. And some kids need, and we just go through every finger. Some kids really like this one, even 4th and 5th graders. Most 5th graders want to switch to something that's a little more private. So they'll either do it under their desk if they still want to do the 5-finger breathing, or they'll move on to a different kind of a breathing. But this one the kids really like because 5 breaths for a lot of people is you can start feeling a difference and you know if that's enough after you've traced your whole hand, or should I do it one more time, 2 more times, whatever. It really depends on how quickly you catch yourself that you are starting to get dysregulated. And our goal is that we start learning when we're getting dysregulated so that we can pick up quickly, do a quick reset, and then we're able to move on.
I
So
use this personally.
you use the lazy 8?
The 5-finger breathing. I love it.
Okay. This one kind of comes from Brain Gym. I don't know if any of you know of Brain Gym. It's 26 different exercises that work on integrating the different parts of your brain. And so with this, I'm sitting a little too close to my computer. I'm just going to put my arms out and I'm going to focus on my thumbs. And I'm just going to draw the infinity sign or a lazy 8 laying down. And I'm going to breathe in as I'm over here. And then when I hit the middle, I'm going to hold and then breathe out over here. And again, these are big movements. This is also crossing your midline, which for kids is really important for helping them learn to read and do other things that need both sides of your brain. For example, recognizing faces is one side, but names are on the other. So you really kind of need both sides just for even remembering someone's name in the grocery store. Oh, I recognize you and your name is whatever. So this is one a lot of kids really like. This is the one that I do because I can draw this right on my leg. And this is called square breathing or rectangular breathing. And so I'll do it up here. Normally I do it on my leg, but this is one that I can give a little note card for a kid and we can tape it on their desk and they can trace it and nobody knows. And sometimes for a kid who's really quick to be embarrassed that something's different, I'll put them on everyone's desk and teach it to them. And the kids who don't need it don't use it. But because it's on everyone's desk, the kids who do need it are more likely to use it. But this is one, 4th and 5th grade, usually up, is when I see kids trying to switch from the 5-finger breathing or the hot chocolate breathing or something to this. So again, we're going to inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And so it's just, you do as many as you want. You know, I was at a gathering with my friends from Girl Scout camp. We worked together 40 years ago. And there was a little traffic coming back and it's like, I noticed I was doing it on my leg. I knew I had plenty of time, but I wanted to make sure I didn't flip my lid as I was getting home. And I got home in plenty of time and I wasn't upset. So again, here is a graphic of how would it feel if we take a sip of water together. It's totally within the kid's choice to say yes or no, which is important. Eileen Hunter Sweeney is a friend of both Shauna's and mine. She used to be a social worker in Jeffco schools. And I love this quote because a dysregulated adult will never help regulate a dysregulated child. If we don't calm ourselves down, we're not going to be able to help the kid get where they need to do. So the first thing when we notice a child having a rough time is that we have to check ourselves. Am I in a good place to deal with this? And, you know, on your bus, you're probably the only one. So you might need to just do nothing for a while because if you're not regulated, you can't really help them. And so it's important to find stuff, try them. It's all, you know, and we also make sure that kids and adults know that what works most of the time may not work every time. It might be that we let it go too long, or it might be that it's just a different part of our brain that's being affected this time and it's not as helpful. It doesn't mean that it's a bad strategy. It just means that right now it's not working and that's okay. I like this guy is a principal and he says education so often is focused on showing students who they aren't. You're not a good math student, you're not a good reader, etc. Instead of focusing on who they are. We need to look at their talents, their strengths, and their passions. I was a kid that couldn't read. I have severe double vision, but I didn't know it till I was 20 because the school I test only tests distance vision. And so they would tell me I had 20/20 vision. And I do think that my incredible memory to this day is because I listened to the other reading groups and learned the story so that I didn't look like I was dumb. That was my concern in the 60s was people are going to think I'm dumb. And so if we focus on what kids are good at, we can usually use their strengths to help those more challenging areas. And it's important for kids to know what we see as their strengths and their talents. And they may not all be school related. Maybe this kid plays guitar. Well, we don't play guitars usually in public schools. Or maybe they're an amazing artist. Yeah, we have art, but maybe not the kind of art they do. Or maybe it is the same kind of art. But we have to focus on those things. You know, it's not just math, reading, social studies, science. It's the whole child is really important. I love this because we call this the climate of your house. Think about how the energy in your home feels when you come in. Does it feel like a safe, calm place, like the place on the left? Or is it more like a storm is brewing? And if you're an empath or someone who is really good at reading energy, you can tell how it feels. But this is also important for you to notice, am I creating a storm or am I helping the calm? Which one am I? Because my energy is going to impact the energy of the family, just like anyone else who comes in. Even as a really young child, when my mom started working when I was in 5th grade, and I walked home as a kindergartner in 1966 because it was safe to do so. And I was in half-day kindergarten. So I walked home alone and I would open the back door and I would listen to see what kind of emotional energy was present in my home. And nobody taught me that. I just picked it up, and I knew that my mom, she struggled with depression and anxiety her whole life. And I knew I had to, if it felt tense in the house, I better make sure the coat really got on the coat hanger, the bag really got in the closet, the shoes really got in the closet, because things were more tense on those days. So paying attention to the energy in the home or the energy wherever you are is really helpful. I love these de-escalation phrases for kids, and they may not all be applicable at the time. I mean, if the kid really is in trouble, don't tell them they're not. But if they really aren't in trouble, let them know, because they assume everything that they do, they're in trouble. Let them know if you're really not mad at them, tell them. Ask them how you can help. And they may not know. And you might say, would you like a little time and space? And then we can talk more. What happened? Let's talk about this. These are really great things. And again, sometimes they need think time. They need to have a chance to just go and sit and try to reconnect that prefrontal cortex and that amygdala and be able to answer you. I was raised with I'm talking to you, you better answer me. Well, I couldn't answer. And most kids can't. And, we didn't know that back then. We know that now. So these are really, really helpful, because kids are so quick to assume that they made a mistake, and they are often the hardest people on themselves. They'll say, oh, that was the stupidest thing. I mean, middle school kids, when I worked middle school, which was only a couple years, but I dropped my pencil in the hall during passing period and everybody saw me and I looked so stupid. Nobody saw you, honey. They were all worried about looking stupid themselves. But you have to help them. You have to meet them where they are. So we are seeing lots and lots of worries, especially since COVID. A lot of people lost people either to death, or they had geographical moves because it was too expensive to stay here. And they moved to a cheaper place in a different state. So, and our 4th and 5th graders, a lot of times did kindergarten and 1st grade remotely. And so they didn't learn a lot of the stuff then. Most of them are catching up, but not all of them. Some of them still, it's a challenge. And so I love Anxiety Girl, because we do have kids that everything, they're going to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. And knowing that about them, that just means that their brains flip quicker, and we have to help them. So, oh, good grief, these tights are too tight. I think I'm going to die. To them, that's real. And they jump to the worst conclusion. And then, of course, our Charlie Brown, my anxieties have anxieties. Some kids stay up at night because they can't sleep, because they can't shut their brains off. Overthinkers are not just gifted kids. They could be anyone with anxiety. And talking to kids about these things, normalizing that this is something some people have, is really helpful. I was talking with a friend of mine. I mean, not a friend of mine. Well, she is a friend, but she was a 5th grader. I had a pretty significant health issue where I had some pulmonary embolisms last April and ended up in the ICU for a weekend. And then I was out the whole rest of the week. And when I came back, I had missed time with this 5th grade girl that's what we talked about, was her anxieties about middle school and everything else. And she said, I bet you overthought that. And I said, you are absolutely right. I totally overthought that, because that was a normal thing that we talked about, that a lot of times we do overthink, and then we can't shut our brains off, and then we're not getting the rest we need. And we have strategies for those kind of things. This, I think, is one of the best grounding strategies for kids. You can do them in different orders. Smell and taste really are best in the 2 to 1. And one thing that I've learned since the first time I learned this is that we can't just do it. We actually have to say it. So if I'm going to do 5 things that I see, the first time, when I was first learning it, it was like, okay, got them. But what we've learned is that to reconnect our brains, we actually need to say them out loud, even if it's only loud enough for us to hear it at a whisper. So I see my sink, I see my kitchen table, I see my glasses, I see my dog Tess, and I see my soda. Then 4 things that you can feel. And again, I feel my shirt, I feel the table, I feel my phone, I feel, whatever. 3 things you can hear. And it's interesting because, I learned this after working with gifted kids. Our 2E kids that also have ADHD, they can hear the buzz of the lights. They can hear so much more than someone who doesn't have ADHD. 2 things that you smell and 1 thing that you can taste. And so, because even when you're not eating something, there's a taste in your mouth. Sometimes it's a good taste. Sometimes it's I need to go brush my teeth taste, whatever. But having kids go through this slowly and calmly, they actually, and I use it myself, it actually really, really helps. I'll do it in traffic. I'll do it at school. I'll do it in crowds because I don't like crowds. It's really, really helpful, but especially saying it so that you're reconnecting your brain. Rest is so important. I think in our society, we are programmed that if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. Well, rest is a kind of productive behavior. If you're not resting, then you are not taking care of your body. And if your body is not being taken care of, you can't take care of anyone else. It's like the oxygen on a plane. You have to put your own oxygen on before you help anyone else. So taking time away. Don't let your vacation days build up. Use them. You have permission to not help people. To say, you know what, I'm really sorry that you're dealing with this right now. I just don't have the bandwidth. I wonder if so-and-so could help you. Do something unproductive. And it's not really unproductive. If you choose to draw, or if you choose to read or watch a movie or do something like that, that is helping your brain and body rest. It's really not unproductive, but we label it that way. Have a connection to art and nature. I love going for drives in the mountains. I love sunrises and sunsets. I love photography, all of those kind of things. And when I'm busy and stressed, I don't do them. And I can tell the difference. A lot of people, even our extroverts, need solitude to recharge their batteries. Extroverts don't need it nearly as much as introverts, but everyone needs some time alone to do whatever it is that helps them. Take a break from responsibility. If you're a parent, maybe somebody else cooks dinner. Maybe somebody else cleans the house. Maybe someone else does the grocery shopping. And you share that. If you're a single parent, that's hard. Having contact with other single parents, and can you take my kids this day and I'll take them this day, so that you can both do those things. There's different ways to try to do that, but it's really, really important. That stillness to decompress. If you're up and moving around, it's really hard to calm your body down. Be in a safe space is important, and having alone time at home, anywhere, is really important. These are really crucial, and our society says that they're unproductive, which is nonsense. So we have to reprogram our own brains. These are some ways that kids like to check out, decompress. Maybe it's just laying in the sun. Maybe it's checking, looking for bugs, laying in the flowers. Maybe it's drawing, laying in a hammock, being at the beach, swinging. For neurodivergent kids, the motion, that vestibular stim of swinging back and forth is so regulating for them. Playing in water. There's a reason we have water tables. It's for kids to, they're not only learning, but they're calming their senses down. And the turtle, I put in 1 because we teach kids, when I worked in that program with the kids who were aggressive, one of the techniques that we taught them was to be a turtle. Because if I'm really angry and I'm going to hit you, if I pull my arms into my shell and I tuck my head into my shell, I can't really, I literally cannot hit you if I have my arms as tight as possible. They will not hit you and I will keep myself out of trouble. And so this is a really important thing for toddlers to learn because they're impulsive. They don't have these strategies. And so when they get mad, they do lash out. And so teaching them, tighten those muscles up. It's also a relaxation. You tighten and you release. So it kind of builds into there, but you cannot try it. You cannot hit someone if your arms are as tight as you can have them. So that's a really good way to keep yourself out of trouble, but also help yourself calm down. Self-talk, I said earlier that we are usually our biggest critics. And so it's really important that we are changing how we talk to ourselves. And so think about your favorite coach or teacher and those positive messages that they gave you, and then start giving them to yourself. So this is tough, but so am I. I might not be able to control this situation, but I get to decide how I respond. And I haven't figured this out. And that yet is so important. It's part of the whole growth mindset that we've been learning about for the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, that it's okay. You might not be able to do this yet, but you're going to learn it. The challenge is
Lacey,
here to
I'm
teach
gonna-
me.
I'm
Huh?
going to interject with a question right quick too.
Okay.
So would you call play a form of rest as well?
Yeah, for little kids, yeah, absolutely.
And definitely co-regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, because that's how they communicate. If you look at how kids go to therapy, play therapy is the most effective for your younger kids, elementary and under. Yeah, I mean, sitting and playing in the sand, you know, driving their little cars around, playing with their Barbies, maybe not playing soccer, but the kind of imagination play that a lot of us did when we were younger, that's a very helpful way. You know, I have bins of toys, superheroes, all sorts of different toys, Legos, because that is a regulation strategy. Is if I'm building this, I'm focusing on what am I creating? Or, you know, who's Superman saving this time? Yeah, I am a huge believer that kids need to play more and less screens. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Normalizing that challenges usually are here to teach us something is a helpful thing as well. That, you know, math isn't out to get you. It's here to get your brain, honey. It's to develop a certain part of your brain so that you can do the kind of math that you want to do when you're older, or whatever the challenge is. Maybe your parents are separating and you need to learn how to be more independent. You need to learn how to self-advocate, that I don't like when you two argue around me. And how do you respectfully make those kind of statements to people? Because kids should be able to tell people in a respectful way something that they need. All I need to do is take one step at a time. I need to breathe and do the next right thing. That they don't have to solve the world's problems, but what is the next right thing? And so maybe the next right thing is I need to go get away from this situation. Stop. Or maybe it's I need to tell someone how I'm feeling. But this is where, I mean, most of us need 5 to 10 repetitions for things to start forming in our brains and be able to access them when we need them. A lot of neuroatypical kids need 20 to 100. So we have to figure out and keep talking to kids and keep teaching these kind of things. Oops. Okay. I like to point out with heroes of kids, and a lot of the kids don't know as much about Michael Jordan, just the real basketball guys, but I love this. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I was trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I failed over and over in my life, and that's why I succeed. Failure is not a bad thing. When we fail, we learn something from it. And, Michael Jordan was the guy that he, after practice, would shoot 500 free throws. And I don't know what his stats were when he finished his career, but his free throw statistic was up in the 80%, I believe. And, you look at some of these other players and they're down in the 30s. He looked at an area that wasn't great and he worked on it. And he used that failure to build success. And so we have to normalize that you're not going to win every time. You're not going to get the A every single time. Perfectionism isn't just a gifted thing. It happens with a lot of our kids in things that really matter to them. And it's important to normalize that every single person fails. So take somebody that your child or the kids that really admires and find out sometimes that they failed. There's a really great book called Gifted or Goof Off. And what I love about it is usually 1, sometimes 2-page little synopsis of someone's life. So they talk about Oprah Winfrey getting fired, Walt Disney losing his cartooning job in some newspaper. And then you think about how far they went. And so we have to normalize that success and failure go hand in hand, that we're not always going to win, and failure is okay. That it doesn't mean we're a terrible person. It doesn't mean that we stink. Nothing like that. Flipping the scene is thinking about the advice that you'd have for a friend if they came to you with the same problem. So we're more tolerant of imperfections of others than our own. So if your friend is having a hard time with getting along with someone, would you tell them to go beat them up? I hope not. Some kids would. But use that advice because we are so kind to other people, much kinder than we are to ourselves. And hopefully we're changing that. But it is kind of a normal thing to be really hard on ourselves. So that's a really great strategy. This is another one that really helps. Is this going to matter? And then all these different time things. I lost a recess kickball game and I think my friend cheated. Is it going to matter in 5 minutes? Probably. And maybe still in an hour and maybe still at the end of the day. But next week, am I going to remember? No. In a month? No, none of the rest of them. It's not going to matter. If my parent dies and I'm a 3rd grader, it's probably going to impact me the whole time. But so many things, like I think of all the conflicts I had on the playground as a kid, and I was a very competitive kid. I don't remember. I remember the laughing. I remember having fun playing kickball. I remember that we argued, but I don't remember what it was about. And I stressed a lot about it, and it wasn't worth the stress. I say that my 2 heroes have color names. So Ross Greene and Brene Brown. I love this because it's when someone spews something really hurtful, don't pick it up and hold it and rub it into your heart and snuggle with it and carry it around for a long time. Don't even put energy into kicking it to the curb. You've got to see it and step over or go around it and keep going. And that's really important because, if somebody calls a kid a really nasty name, a lot of times they're like, they called me this. And it's like, but are you? Well, no. Then why are you giving it any attention? I don't see you that way. You don't see you that way. Maybe they're just having a bad day. And it's hard. If somebody says something really mean, it's really hard. But this is a skill we have to keep talking to kids and adults about so that we're not doing that to ourselves. I think it's really important that we change a lot of our language. You know, kids aren't necessarily always strong-willed, they're spirited. There's more positive ways of describing. You know, they always talk about women lawyers being the B word, where men lawyers are assertive. No, they're both assertive. We got to get those gender things out of there. But someone who's bossy isn't necessarily bossy. Maybe they're a leader and they just don't have the skills. Maybe instead of loud, they're just expressive. Those dreamy kids, instead of saying, oh God, they're a daydreamer. Well, you know what? They're really imaginative and they're going to do great things with their imagination. A lot of parents will say, I asked my kid how school was and I get fine. So don't ask that question. Ask them one of these questions. What was creative? Who did you help today? Why was today a good day? How was your lunch? Who'd you eat with? What was the best part of your day? What do you want to learn about by the end of the year? Who did you play with at recess? What rule was hard to follow? So instead of how was your day? Yes, it's an open-ended question, but kids don't answer it. If you narrow it down, you usually get a bigger and a more clear answer. Self-advocacy, we talked about this a little bit. You have to know yourself to know what you need and how to get it. So we need to help kids identify what it is they need. They need a snack if they're hangry. Maybe it's a drink, a brain break. Time and space, I think is one of the most effective. If I'm upset, I don't want you to talk to me. Leave me alone. And then I will re-regulate myself and we can work on it. Decrease the sensory input, lower the lights or headphones if it's too much noise, and then help them learn the difference between assertive and aggressive. Because we want kids to be assertive, but we don't want them to be aggressive. And then again, we have, instead of red flags, here's some green flags. So things that build relationships. So we want to do things that support our personal growth, that help us build our own responsibility, that honors boundaries. Boundaries are really, really important and kids really seek them. We want to help kids learn how to communicate openly, that they can talk to you about whatever's going on and they're not going to be in trouble. You know, when I first was offered a cigarette in 3rd grade, my mom was a smoker. If I felt like I could talk to her and not be in trouble and get Jay, my friend who offered me the cigarette, in trouble, I could have done it, but it wasn't okay. Healthy hobbies. Some people do spirituality, whatever. Long-standing friendships. All of these things build relationships, and that's what we want for kids. And that's what those pictures are, healthy relationships. I like this because we teach the anger iceberg, and I just got this not too long ago. Success is also like an iceberg, because what people don't see is everything that went in to the success that people see. And so when somebody gets an award at a school, you know, there's some kids that are struggling and they're like, why don't I get that award? And if you ask them, well, what do you think they did to do that? And they start putting all those things together, and maybe you putting in some things too. And they go, oh, well, I'm not doing those things. Well, maybe pick one and try it. And then maybe we can add another one. But successful people aren't just usually magically successful. It's because of all the work that they're doing behind the scenes usually. And then this is a really important one. On particularly rough days when I'm sure I can't possibly endure, I like to remind myself that my track record for getting through bad days so far is 100%. So, and then I am a dog person. So your stress level is too high, follow me to the lab, and there's the lab. So find what works for you, and get yourself there. So let me stop sharing. I know it's a little after 4, so I apologize.
No, you are perfectly on time because we did start a few minutes late. So I will go ahead and say thank you to everyone so much for joining us. And you have a lovely, lovely day. And Casey, you are incredible as always. And we appreciate you more than you will ever know.
Were there any questions before we jump off?